So, Nigel, I have to start with the extraordinary news that we heard yesterday, that Reform UK has now topped a national opinion poll for the first time. People may or may not talk about methodology or otherwise. The direction of travel, I don't think anybody disputes it. It's extraordinary. What do you account for the fact that Reform appears to be making significant headway since the election?
Momentum. We've got momentum. You're absolutely right, and they vary a bit, but every poll shows an upward trend. The polls now consistently put us above the Conservative Party. Interestingly, 20% of our vote now, of our potential vote now, comes from people who did not vote in the last election.
And that's why some of this methodology is so interesting, because very often the polls will go back to the people who voted last time.
Exactly.
Gives you the wrong answer.
So we're beginning to understand that a lot of people didn't vote last time because they're just disgusted with what happened under 14 years of Conservatism, didn't see Labour as a great alternative, but didn't think Reform were viable.
Right.
Because we were just too new. We were just too new. Also thought, you know what, what's the point of voting for them? They can't win any seats under first past the post. And that's why winning just those 5 was so significant.
And it was interesting that Reform came second in 93 seats around the country. It won't have escaped your attention, I'm sure, as to which those seats are. I'm assuming that this machine that you have to put in place in order to do politics, you have to have grassroots activists, you have to have money and momentum, as you say, you have to have the mainstream media. I mean, you know, how infuriating is it for you, despite the fact that you've got perhaps the leading poll, that getting that airtime on mainstream media or otherwise is still governed by the fact that you have 5 MPs?
That's more of a problem in the House of Commons. In the Commons, it is a real problem. You know, getting speaking slots, getting the right time, because we're only 5, is a problem. I think more broadly, it's less of a problem, because frankly, in British politics, we are the story. So that's why I'm sitting here talking to you. So that's less of a problem. I mean, most of my time, since July the 4th, the last general election, with Zia Youssef, who I bought in, you know, tech guy, in his 30s, very bright, made a lot of money. He's the chairman. Most of our time and effort is building the structure, building the organisation, getting a new party constitution, changing the ownership of the company behind the party, building branches, vetting candidates and doing it properly to make sure bad guys don't slip through. And actually, we are building a network, and we've been terribly excited about May the 1st. May the 1st, the English County Council elections. We're told that tomorrow, half of them are going to be cancelled.
And that is extraordinary. So can you just explain for those who don't quite understand what it is that the government are planning to do?
This has not been talked about at all. But about 20 million people living in England are due to get a vote on May the 1st. They'll be voting for their county councils or, in some cases, unitary authorities. And these matter, because these are the people providing elderly care services. These are the people providing mental health services for youngsters. These are the people in charge of potholes and issues which really matter to people.
There are a lot of potholes.
Well, absolutely, and it does matter. But Labour want to reorganise the structure of local government. That has been used by county councils in which the Conservatives are in control to say, oh, well, if there are changes coming, let's suspend the elections. And guess what? The councils that have asked for suspensions of the elections are the ones in which Reform is the strongest. And it looks like, and we'll find out tomorrow, I believe, up to 10 million people who should have voted, you know, 4 years after their last vote for their county councillors will be denied the vote for a year, maybe 2 years, maybe longer. I mean, I thought only dictators cancel elections.
I mean, I think
incredible.
If you want to make changes to the system and the boundaries and all that sort of business,
debate it.
Debate it, but then you do it within the framework of the existing organisation to make sure that those people are being held to account and elected.
Yeah, we're told that it'll take at least 3 years for any changes to come through. Well, the term's only 4 years. So there is no reason to stop these elections. This is the Labour and Conservative Party would like to avoid fighting us in local elections. It's pretty appalling.
Now, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, or Rachel from account, or however you wish to refer to her, she said this morning that she's very happy to join the EU customs group. How do you respond to that?
Tie yourself to failure. You think we're in trouble? Have a look at the economies of France. Have a look at the economies of Germany. They're in even deeper economic trouble than we are. Why on earth we wish to tie ourselves more closely to them. Look, we're in a good position. Because of Brexit, we can negotiate our own trade arrangements anywhere around the world.
And you would never argue against having good trading relationships with the EU,
Of course not.
And that's part of the people. People say, oh, but we did Brexit, we must never speak to them again. That's not your mantra at all, is it?
That has never been the point. And some polls say, who do you choose, America or Europe? No, this is not an either-or. This is not an either-or. But here's the danger. We tie ourselves more closely to the European Union laws. That'll make it more difficult for us to get favourable trading terms with America. And guess what? America's growing and Europe's contracting. And what we shouldn't do anything that cuts ourselves off from America.
So would you say, to coin a phrase, America first and then pick up the pieces afterwards?
No, I'm not saying that.
No, but as in deal with the American situation first so that we understand what our trading opportunity is, and then go to Europe knowing...
To say today, within 24 hours of a telephone call, that'll take place between Donald Trump and Sir Keir Starmer, that's the direction we're going in. I'm sorry, it's a very silly thing to do.
Can I ask you about Donald Trump and Keir Starmer? Because Donald Trump has today, or yesterday, said that he thought that Keir Starmer was doing a very good job. I mean, is he just a fantastic liar? Is he a fantasist? Or does he just want to have a nice relationship? He wants to come over because he wants to see the king. What's going on? You know Donald Trump better than anybody.
He's very good at being polite, until you upset him, and then he's not polite. This is an Anglophile president. Half the incoming cabinet in America are Anglophiles. This is an incredible opportunity for us. Let's grab it with both hands. Let's make sure that we're not just outside the tariff regime that he might bring in. There's also a chance here to negotiate sectoral free trade agreements on booze, on financial services, on motorbikes, on whatever you like. Agriculture may be harder. So great opportunities here. And Trump knows that and Trump sees that. But as I say, Rachel Reeves's comments don't help. The other big issue, which we have talked about here, but maybe not enough, is this sort of student idea that we have to give away the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, which have never owned it, but hey. Diego Garcia is America's most important military base anywhere in the world outside the mainland. It matters for their nuclear submarines. It matters for their, bomber fleets, fighter fleets. If we give into the special relationship, us allowing the Americans to use that base unencumbered, it's the biggest give we have to America. And in return, they protect us. And without them, we're defenceless. I mean, just wake up, everybody. This is where we are in an increasingly dangerous world. So that has been a very big worry. And they were trying to sneak it through before the inauguration. Had that happened, I promise you, Donald Trump would not have been as polite yesterday as he was.
And then presumably, because of that, I mean, we now hear that Mauritius has opened conversations and discussions with Iran. People don't necessarily think about the unintended consequences of an act. And they might say, well, you know, we were a domineering country and we had our empire and we must apologise for it and pay reparations, all this nonsense. But when it actually comes to it, the reason that these places are there is because we do have a worldwide role to play. Yeah. And when we sometimes forget about these bases, maybe we don't even know they exist or the importance to our safety. But they are tremendously important. We shouldn't just be giving things away.
We're not just giving it away, we're paying. We're giving it away and paying for the privilege. Up to £9 billion. It's madness. Anyway, he didn't sneak it through before the inauguration, so there is still hope on that front, thank goodness. And of course, there are debates about Peter Mandelson and much else. I would just urge the government, you know, if you get too close to the European Union, you'll damage that relationship. It makes no sense.
Now, the government have confirmed retailers selling knives online, they're going to require ID to purchase and also on delivery. Now, this has emerged after the Southport killer Axel Rudy-Cabana bought the knife that he used to kill 3 young girls from Amazon when he was just 17 years old. I mean, there are so many aspects to this case, and I know that you've written to Angela Rayner. I wonder whether you've received a response to your request for an apology, but also whether you think that the government is taking enough action to deal with knife sales.
Look, you know, dealing with knife sales, fine. I bet there's barely a kitchen drawer in the country without at least half a dozen knives in it already.
Which is the problem, isn't it?
So you know, frankly, the more we do... Oh, government getting tough, you can't buy a knife unless you're 18, right? What about prevent? What about the fact this guy was referred 3 times to prevent? What about the fact he was found 10 times at school carrying a knife? What about the absolute failures of all the authorities, child services, Prevent, the local police. What about those failures?
And that's the point, isn't it? Which is when you're talking about something which is a failure of either an individual themselves or an individual to be constrained because of the danger they present to society, particularly when it's something that is so widely available. You are never going to stop. As you say, knives, we all use them. You're never going to stop them being there. So you have to stop the person who is going to use it in the inappropriate way.
Yes, that didn't happen. And then they suppressed the truth for as long as they possibly could. And in fact, because of the guilty plea, there's a lot more would have come out in the court case, but that's by the by, perhaps for now. And, you know, I said the next day, because I could see the crackpot conspiracy theories that were going around the internet. You know, in a vacuum, who knows what can come and fill that space? And I asked the question, was this man known to the authorities? Can we please know the truth? And Jonathan Hall, KC, who's the terrorism czar, said many, many times, tell the public as much as you can, without prejudicing the trial. And after the David Amos case, we knew about the man that did it. After the London Bridge bombings, we knew about the identities of some of those individuals. This time...
And it's not a difficult question to answer, were they known to the authorities?
No.
Because if they'd come back and said, yes, but it's complicated and we're going to come back with full information, all of us would have backed off and said, OK, fine. We get it.
I was demonised. I mean, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, many MPs, many broadcasters, newspaper columns, said that I'd incited the riots by simply asking for the truth. I think the riots happened, in many ways, because of that lack of information. And I must say, that what I learnt last week, that the Crown Prosecution Service told Liverpool Police not to put out the relevant material.
Isn't that a sign they're threatened by him?
Well, it's a sign that heads should roll, frankly, and that the CPS is not doing its job properly.
Talking of people not doing their job properly, I turn back to Rachel Reeves. Growing the economy is arguably the thing that will help the nation, put more money in people's pockets, everything else. If you were Prime Minister and you were in charge of ultimately everything, what are the measures that you would wish your Chancellor to put forward?
Right. There are two fundamental things we have to do. One, get people in positions of authority who actually know what risk is. What do I mean by that? Every single person listening to this who owns a small business or is self-employed, they know what risk is. You know, risk is you lose your business, you lose money, you go bust. Risk is you get ill. Risk is you can't take holidays like many can.
And there's a price to risk, isn't there?
There is a price to risk. There is also an opportunity to risk. So you need people in government that understand what business is. Not a single member of that front bench has ever set up their own small business. Not one. And if we don't have the private sector producing wealth, we can't afford to pay for the public sector.
OK, so one job is to get people who understand business in power.
Secondly, a total change of attitude. Trump is talking America up. And you know what? Bartenders and taxi drivers, they're expressing that feeling. The economy operates on confidence. People borrow and lend money, you know, do they feel comfortable doing it?
So specifically then...
So what Reeves has done is talk down. The Prime Minister gave a speech. Things can only get worse. And now suddenly, after 3 days in Davos, she's come back with different plans in a desperate effort to save her own skin as Chancellor because she knows their position is weakened. So a change of attitude. And I want us to start saying to young people particularly, you'll never succeed in life unless you work hard. Let's stop all this work from home, 4-day week. This is all utter rot. It doesn't work. We need a new culture that says success is good, making money is good, having rich people in the country is great because they pay loads of tax. And what have we done? Both with Jeremy Hunt and now with Rachel Reeves, thousands of well-off people are leaving Britain.
Would you reverse the changes that Rachel Reeves made to inheritance tax for farmers and that she made to national insurance?
I think the farmers are going to win. I think there are 100 rural constituencies in which they now have Labour MPs with cigarette paper margins. And I think what we're now beginning to see is a lot more mobilisation of farming groups around the country, albeit in a very decent, proper way. So I do think there's a good chance of the inheritance tax threshold being raised. And I can tell you, in the part of Essex where you live and that I represent, you know, I've been out and met farmers in tears because they want, you know, they're asset rich because land values have gone up, their incomes are very low, but they want their kids and grandkids You know,
I mean, if they were to sell the farm, by all means, take the tax.
Yeah. Well,
But if they're passing it on to people who are going to run it and produce the food...
why do you think the English countryside, as beautiful as it is, it's because farms and estates have managed things beautifully over the centuries. I mean, if they sell them off, I mean, if Ed Miliband gets his way, there'll all be solar farms or something ghastly like that.
So what about that national insurance? Would you reverse that?
Well, I think the national insurance is going to prove to be pretty disastrous. You know, when even big supermarket chains are talking about thousands of job losses. I was visiting a care home yesterday. It was a lady's 105th birthday.
Wowzers.
So there was her card from the King and Queen and the one from 5 years ago from the Queen. And she had 3 glasses of champagne. So really quite impressive for 105. Yeah, I mean, the hospices. There are all sorts, GP practices, there are all sorts of knock-ons from this, even outside the business community.
There are, and the Treasury Minister who I spoke to before, James Murray, simply wouldn't address those issues.
No, I mean,
that charities and care homes and organisations up and down the country, they're trying to work out where they're going to get the money.
Did they think this through? I honestly don't know. What I do know is
would you reverse it?
Yes, because it's a catastrophe.
And so you would reverse the inheritance tax on farms, and you would reverse national insurance.
We've got to. Otherwise, we're facing a very major problem. And if you put taxes up, but your revenues fall, you have a problem.
Correct.